Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for bringing that wonderful film to us. It's very powerful. And, like most people, I thought I knew all about Standing Rock, following it on the news and all. But after seeing this film, I just learned so much that I was never aware of. And I think a lot of people will feel that way. So how did it start? This is a question I always ask in the beginning of the Q&As. How did the journey begin?
Well, it began in the summer of 2016 when I was actually living out of the country. I was living in Honduras, covering human rights abuses down there. And I saw the video that LaDonna Brave Bull Allard put out on Facebook saying, we ask that people come and stand with us. And I thought, I've been out of the country for years covering stories of people in foreign lands. And here this is happening in my own backyard. And so I better get back home and cover this. And so that was like 24 hours or so from having that realization to getting on a plane and going to Standing Rock. And Wašté was one of the very first interviews that I conducted.
Wow, that was fast work.
It was.
You were drawn to it by the passion.
Yes. I always say that my projects choose me rather than me choosing the projects. Yeah. It's like it's just this feeling that something greater than myself pulls me to it.
Well, that's the best way, I think.
Yes.
But you obviously had to figure out a timeline and get equipment and all sorts of things like that. So how did that come about?
Well, when I got on the plane in Honduras, I still didn't even have the money to pay our camera person or the rental car or the hotel. But I thought, okay, I sent out an email to 6 people that I hope will help with this. And by the time I landed, I could cover the first 2 or 3 days of shooting. And this was really a project that we were working, especially at first, on a shoestring and just hoping for the best. And in the end, we had more than 1,700 crowdfunders from 45 plus countries that made this film a reality. And I'm just so grateful for that support, because it truly would not have been made without that support and of donors that we reached via grant writing.
But right away you put out the word.
Yes. We started releasing videos after the first 2 days out at Standing Rock. We released videos that actually went viral. And we're really thrilled that it did. And that we also, not just for our film, but that we were able to help get the word out as to what was happening in North Dakota.
Yeah. And how did you connect with Shannon Wašté?
Shannon approached my mother, Phyllis Young, and I spoke with her through my aunt, Pearl Means, who is the widow of our uncle, the late Russell Means. And so they were all connected somehow. And my mom came and asked me to do this interview. And I didn't like to do a lot of interviews or press. I would always say, go talk to LaDonna, or talk to Chase, or talk to my mom. And Shannon was persistent. And then finally, my mom pretty much ordered me to do the interview. So that's how it started.
No one says no to Phyllis Young. You probably saw that in the film. Yeah. She is a force.
Uh-huh. And probably no one says no to Shannon Kring either.
Well, they try. You have to be persistent in this line of work.
Yeah. And when she proposed to you that she was making a film, Wašté, how did you feel about all of a sudden being on camera?
I said no. I said no to the interview initially. And I knew that she was doing a film. And I always been the researcher, the behind the scenes person growing up. And So for this to become what it has is really crazy to me, because it's something that I initially didn't want to do, but I'm glad I did.
Yeah, looks like you adapted very well. It's such great cinematography and very powerful. How was it getting access?
Access was not always easy. First of all, to establish the trust with the women. As you saw, we were with them in very intimate settings and in some of their most really life-transforming moments. And so that was the first line of access. And then just simply getting to them. Law enforcement made it difficult at times. I was interrogated, and there were roadblocks set up. And, we faced a lot of resistance every step of the way. But at a certain point, well, I was always determined to make the film, but the women in front of the camera eventually also had determination to get the story out. And I'm just thrilled with that, because when I headed out to Standing Rock, I had no idea that it was actually the women who were running everything, that it's the role of the woman in their society to protect the water. And so I was just really honored to be welcomed into their world. And I took it as a very serious responsibility. I still do, to do right by them and to tell the story that they wanted told, not the story that I thought should be told.
Yeah, and that probably evolved over the
Yes.
course.
Yes. I didn't realize that it should just be about the women. I really set out to tell a balanced story. I was even going to talk to Dakota Access Pipeline and just tell the entire story. But after the first day of filming, it became very clear that this was a story just about the women. And I said that to my co-producer, Pearl Daniel Means. I said, I think this should just be about the women. And she said, duh, I could have told you that. She just knew that that was what was meant to happen. And I think they told the story so beautifully, and also gave us the context, the historical context, and the present day stories that led to Standing Rock and why it really came to a head and why they stood up and said enough is enough.
Yeah, and that was wonderful, the way you used archival footage to kind of set the context.
The archival footage I poured over hours upon hours of footage, and I was stunned at what I found. One of the videos was a parade in 1929 in Kansas, and it was people of color hanging from nooses on trees, on floats in a parade. The KKK marching on Washington, down the streets of actually right where I lived in Washington, D.C. And just horrible, horrible depictions of Native Americans in the boarding school settings. And as difficult as it was to include some of this footage, because it made me actually sick to my stomach, I felt it's so important that people understood that these are things that have been happening for 525 plus years and are still happening today, which you saw with the boarding school stories, the forced sterilization stories, and the foster care abuses when we saw poor Mackenzie being taken out of the only home she ever knew. And she was actually out of her home 3.5 years. Who would have thought that this is actually happening? Of course, the Native people know it. They know their own story. This film was made with the goal of having outsiders see it and to learn what is happening and to hopefully stand with them in their resistance, not just against pipelines, but against all of the atrocities that they continue to face.
Yeah, it was very effective. It added a little depth to it. They gave you something to go on.
Yes.
What did you think? Were you involved in the editing process at all, Wašté?
No, I wasn't. I was really apprehensive because I recently saw the finished film, and it was so powerful, and I do believe that it triggers a lot inside of me that I'm still trying to confront and heal from, you know, all of the things that happened. One thing that I was scared of being in the film was when we met, like the great granddaughter of General Custer.
Wow.
And it was the day of the drilling, and I was really upset at Shannon. And because I descend, I mean, that band at home that we come from, the people, Sitting Bull's band is Hunkpapa. And they were the ones who camped on the edge of the large camp because they protected the people. And so it was just really a difficult day. They started drilling, and Trump had signed the memoranda, you know, facilitating it to go forward. And but that was a moment that I, for the past 5 years maybe, have dreaded seeing on a screen. And I'm thankful that it's not on the film.
Yes, we eventually decided to take that out because it was such a huge story within itself. And it was a very powerful, very emotional moment for everyone. And so it probably will come out as a standalone piece, but for this film, you know, it's difficult. We shot more than 300 hours of footage just out at the protests alone. And we had to cut out entire people who told us beautiful stories and who led us into their homes and their sacred ceremonies. But in the end, you're given, you know, 87 minutes, or for some of our broadcasters, we have 47 minutes, and you have to make really tough decisions. And you know, part of that is working with the women and what should be included, what shouldn't. Wašté was like many of the women who really did not want to see much of anything during the edit process. We had women who were advising us and who were watching every step of the way, but for most of them, it was just way too soon. And it's still very, very emotional. I still get emotional. I've seen this footage hundreds of times, and I still cry at the end and at certain parts in the film. It's very emotional. And people need to realize that these are not, you know, actors. These are people whose lives were put on public display by people such as myself. And I think that filmmakers need to become more responsible, realizing that, you know, not everything is fair game to use. And we need to really respect that these are their lives, and their lives continue after the cameras are turned off. And that's part of the reason why we followed their stories. We actually followed them for about 2.5 years total. And to me, the story of what happened after the pipeline went through was at least as interesting, because their lives changed. Wašté was not only hesitant to be in the film, she was hesitant to become a leader. And now her life has completely transformed. And like it or not, she is looked at as a leader and does a damn good job at it, if I do say so.
Yeah.
That's one, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's a beautiful moment, and I would be happy to share it. But in my mind at that time, we were just so vulnerable, and it was our great grandparents and grandmothers that fought in Little Bighorn, and then it was, you know, Custer's, you know, great granddaughter. And so for us to meet face to face, you know, she got on her knees and apologize, like, you know, it was not her burden. It's not her burden to carry, but it is a beautiful moment, and I hope to share that someday. But it's definitely, like Shannon said, it's hard to see a lot of this.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, this is one that you do really have to digest. You can't just take it all in on first viewing. So what I wanted to ask you is, I know it's very, the scenes of the protests, the first protests, were very, very brutal. And I want to ask Shannon, were you afraid?
I actually don't have any fear when I'm filming. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. It just is. I often am filming in really dangerous environments. I cover Latin America a lot, and that gets very violent. I've seen a number of murders right in front of my eyes. And it's only afterwards where I think, oh, geez, I could have gotten killed doing that. But really, when I'm behind the camera, it's like I am just so focused on capturing the story that I really think of nothing else. I'm like, you know, a woman possessed, so to speak. And so I was not afraid. Now, I was afraid for our women. I was really careful about not revealing information as to where they lived, for instance, because we were filming in their homes after they were no longer out at the camp, after the camp was forcibly closed by the US Army Corps of Engineers. Because I knew that they were already targets. We all got hate mail. We all got death threats during the making of this. And I was also very careful of not giving their names in the initial teaser videos that we used to raise funds to continue telling the story. You know, that's really serious business. There was a time when having a camera was a positive and gave you a whole lot of freedom and safety, and that time is over. It actually makes you a target in many cases, and so I was often afraid for the women and their families.
Yeah, and did the authorities pinpoint you especially and your cameraman?
I was interrogated a few times, but actually, I'm one of the few filmmakers who never had footage seized. I was very, very cautious. My crew and I were every day saving footage in a variety of places. We were driving an hour and a half one way to get to a FedEx and shipping our footage back to our editors. And we were just really conscious of that. A lot of people had their film gear, their cameras smashed, taken. And we were really, really, really careful, and are very, very happy that we got out with all of our footage. But, you know, though I ran into some issues, overall, I was really lucky. There were a number of Indigenous filmmakers who couldn't get through the barricades, for instance. I was given a lot more leniency than a lot of people out there, just alone, not when filming, but driving. I was let through almost always. It would be, oh, sorry, ma'am, to delay you, go through. And meanwhile, people that I was actually traveling in a caravan with were almost never let through to their own homes. It was really quite disgusting.
Why was that? Why do you think that happened?
Well, there are a lot of people who don't want stories such as this to be told. As one of the best signs out at the protest read, scoundrels hate cameras. And that's why, you know, a lot of people have no idea what happens to the Indigenous people of these lands. And I think a lot of people want to keep it that way. And so I think it was fear and now shame. As this film is starting to get seen at festivals and will soon be seen on television, a lot of people are ashamed. We actually had a police officer who was so ashamed of what he did that he actually released to us a lot of footage, a lot of files. And so in the film, you saw us behind police lines. I'd like to say that was always us, but it wasn't. Quite often that was from this man who just was so fed up by what he was being made to do. And we're grateful for that access to that footage.
Yeah, that's very rare.
Yes.
Well, I wanted to throw this out to both of you. It's a completely different world now than it was a couple of years ago. Now, what do you think are the most significant changes that have happened since you completed this film?
Wašté, do you want to take that?
In what context?
Whatever.
The world in general.
The world in general. The new world.
The new world. I'm glad that people see what happened and they use it to become an ally, to become a partner, and especially our youth. We never tell them to like run from Standing Rock to the Army Corps of Engineers in Nebraska and then to DC. Like we never do that. Our youth, and we see it across the board, like the millennials, they're the generation that is going to change things. And that gives me a lot of hope. What I think with Trump and what has been happening, I think it's like the death throes of that white patriarchy that has ruled for hundreds of years. So I always have hope.
Hope. How about you, Shannon?
I had not witnessed in the United States in my lifetime people being so brave as to stand up, knowing that they could even be killed and knowing that people had already been seriously injured at these protests. I hadn't seen that on my country's soil. And Standing Rock really changed things in that people decided to be brave no matter what the cost and to stand up. And I do believe that that affected what has been happening with the Black Lives Matter movement. That has, I believe, directly come as a result of people being so brave as to stand up at Standing Rock, and then went on to fight other pipelines. You know, Standing Rock is just one pipeline of many, as was mentioned in the film by Wašté's mother, Phyllis Young. This one happened to be a strategic one and the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back. But this is an ongoing fight and they're not backing down. And I think they're inspiring new generations of leaders to step up, which is just really awesome to witness.
So you have hope for this new administration?
I don't know if I have hope in the administration. I have hope in the public. I think people are becoming so much more aware and yes, more allies coming forward. Standing Rock was a little different in that they asked for allies. They asked for outsiders to come in and to help them get their story told and to align with them and help and to come out to Standing Rock and then go back to their own countries or cities and see what organizing they could do and what awareness they could bring to the cause. And I think that was really wise from the leadership out at Standing Rock to go that route.
Yeah. Do you think that having a new Native American cabinet member is going to make a difference?
That's really exciting. And I hope that she's able to do all that we know she's capable of doing.
Have you had any contact with her, Wašté?
I have not talked to her. I met her at Standing Rock. It's crazy that we were just sitting there manning our table, this volunteer area, and she came and introduced herself and sat and visited with us, Deb Hallen, and just chilled out with us for several hours. And then she told me that she was going to be running for Congress, and then I moved down here to go to law school. So I'm in my second year of law school and she's an alumna. So I'm pretty, like, this is all crazy how it's like all connected.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we have to wrap this up, but I want to know how will End of the Line be available for others to see?
So we are, yes, we do. We are really happy to be on the film festival circuit. We just had our first festival at the end of February and now have more than 30 festivals in the United States alone. We have a lot of international festivals that are making requests. And we've got a great broadcast distributor out of the UK, one of the top, and they have succeeded in getting us not one or two, but 3 US broadcast deals. That is unheard of for a film such as ours. We knew it would be a long shot to even get one, but it will be airing in the US. I'm not able to share those details yet because the announcements haven't been made, but it's going to be airing all across Europe. We're talking to some Asian broadcasters, and you can also make a donation on our Indiegogo page we are raising crowdfunding now to make an impact marketing campaign and to create teacher guides to get this into the schools at the middle school, high school, and university level, because we think it's really important that young people are educated on these topics. And so we're raising to create that. And so with a donation, you actually get a free download of the film. And so we want this to be seen by as many people as possible. That was always the goal, because we want people who can actually get change made to see this and to work with the women of Standing Rock and give them a seat at the table when decisions are made, especially on their own lands.
So what is that website that people can go to if they want to reach out and help?
It's actually go on our film website, because there's a link right on the homepage, endofthelinefilm.com. We would love if you would go there. You'll also see resources of where you can see the film, upcoming festivals, as well as petitions you can sign. And we post news on there as to what's happening. The next big piece of news for Dakota Access Pipeline's resistance movement is April 9th. There's actually another court hearing to try to stop the pipeline because an environmental impact survey was never conducted. And so that's the next hearing. You know, these women and men, they've continued their fights on the front lines of the fossil fuel divestment movements, and as well as trying to get this litigated properly. And you can find information on our website on how to join those actions as well. So endofthelinefilm.com.
Great. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.
And just one last thing. Do you have any future projects cooking?
I do have future projects cooking, but my focus right now is 100% with this film.
Yeah.
You don't just make a film like this and hope that it does well. You make a film like this, and in my opinion, you birth it until the end. So I think we're in the 9th month now of gestation, but until this film is seen widely, I'm not going to rest. And so still probably 85% or more of my workday is dedicated to this film.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I just want to have one thing, call attention to the wonderful musical soundtrack and the great animated credits in this film. Really lovely.
We had a great team. We had a team from the US and from Finland, and animators in a couple of locations in the US. And this was a project that was kind of a dark horse. At first, getting anyone to take it seriously or be interested, it was really difficult. And eventually we had partners in Finland step up, and the Finnish Film Foundation and their national broadcaster. And people worked so hard and continue to work on this film. Our editor is still editing, actually, for the broadcast versions, which are all different lengths. We have 4 different lengths of this film in the works right now. And so it's something we really care about. And, you know, Wašté and the other people in the film, they're still working hard. You know, Wašté is a mother of 4, and she's a full-time student, and she still takes the time to talk with people about this film. And we're really grateful for that.
Great. And then hopefully there'll be a great educational component to it.
We hope so.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We're really happy to be included in this festival.
Yes.
Thank you.